Hello guys, you're welcome to uComputing's YouTube channel. My name is Eugene, and in this video we're going to have a look at how to perform hot patching on Windows Server 2025. There are a few things that we need to consider when we're performing hot patching on Windows Server 2025. Before we start, I'd like to briefly talk about hot patch. Basically, when Microsoft releases updates every month, especially security update for Windows servers, most of the time the cumulative updates requires a reboot, and most IT engineers that works on servers every now and then using SCCM face challenges with the owners of the servers and scheduler downtime. It's really cause interruption normally during production hours, and even if you want to do it out of hours, people have to stay up late in the night and perform patching, which is very stressful. So a couple of months ago, Microsoft announced that the latest version of Windows Server 2025 is going to feature hot patching, which is basically performing Windows update or applying patches without rebooting our servers. This is a very good news for the tech industry, especially those of us who depend heavily on Windows Server operating systems. I've done some testing and it's really interesting. This technology actually works. So basically what you need an Azure subscription, because hot patching on Windows Server 2025 is done through the Azure Update Manager. So you need Azure subscription and an Azure account that have a minimum contributor rule for RBAC or IAM. Additionally, your Windows Server 2025 operating system needs to be activated, because I've done some testing with Windows Server 2025 and without activation the update do not come through. So you need to make sure your Windows Server 2025 is activated, or you can alternatively use an evaluation copy from Microsoft Evaluation Center, which also works fine for 180 days. And you also need to understand that anytime you're performing patching, you need to make sure if this is a critical server, you perform backups so that if in case something goes wrong, you can revert to the previous state. Now, a few things that I came across when trying my hands on hot patching is that there are some BIOS settings that you need to enable. For example, we have virtualization-based security. So if you're doing this on a physical box, you need to go to the BIOS of the box, or if I say box, I mean a physical computer or a physical server. You need to go into the BIOS and make sure you've enabled virtualization-based security, because hot patching is heavily dependent on this. You also need to make sure you have secure boot enabled, you have Intel VT or AMD V enabled, and you need to make sure you have a TPM chipset 2.0 upwards, and need to verify from the BIOS that is active. Now I'm going to use a virtual environment, so I'm going to show you how you can do this on a VMware EXSI environment if that's what you use for your server environment. So without wasting much time, let's get into the demo. Alright, so as you can see, I have a Windows Server 2025 operating system here running on my EXSI hosts. Okay, once I log in, the first thing I'm going to check is whether or not this server has been activated, because if it's not activated, the update is not going to come through. As you can see, this is server A. I'm going to check the activation status. It shows here that this operating system product has been activated. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure this server is Azure Arc enabled, so that this server gets connected to my Azure subscription. Okay, so I'm going to click here to enable Azure Arc. It's going to give me a wizard. Okay, I'm going to go next here. It's downloading Azure Connected Machine Agents. Okay, once it's done installing Azure Arc, I'm going to click configure here, and then I'm going to follow this configuration wizard for Azure Arc. Basically, you need to connect your server to Azure Arc. As I mentioned earlier on, the update is managed by the Azure Update Manager, so Azure is required here. So it's going to ask you, wizard is going to ask whether you're using Azure Global. So I'm not using any of these other three, so I'm going to leave it at Azure Global and click on sign into Azure. At this point, you need to make sure that you have an Azure account and you have an Azure subscription. So for example, I have an Azure subscription and I have an account that I'm going to be using for this. So I'm going to skip these options here. It's going to take me to login prompt, and I'm going to put in my credential here, Drix at uComputing.cloud. Okay. I'm going to put in my password. Yeah, it's forcing me to change it. It's a new account, so this is very normal. Let's see how it goes. Okay, credentials. Okay, So it's requiring here for me to set up two-factor authentication, but this is a test account, so I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to say ask later here. It tells me authentication is complete and you can return to your application. Now this account that I use has a contributor role, so I'm going to go ahead and click next here. It's going to ask me which Azure Active Directory tenants. I only have one. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to go for my subscription. I have a resource group here called ARC. I'm going to use that, and then I'm going to put this in the East US region. Leave the network connectivity at public endpoint. I'm going to leave the default here and go next. I'm going to go ahead and agree with this. Go next here. It's going to take a few seconds to connect my Windows Server 2025 box to Azure Arc, and afterwards we're going to log into the Azure portal to have a look at the machine. Then from there we're going to go ahead and then configure hot patching for this server. Once it's successfully connected, I'm going to click finish here, and then the next step will be within the Azure portal. So anything that needs to be done on this server is done. I'm going to take you through a few things as well that you need to check, because you can encounter an error when you're doing this if you don't enable those things. Okay, so I mentioned a few BIOS configuration. You don't have to forget that. Secure boot, virtualization-based security, TPM configuration. You need to check all that if you encounter an error. Okay, as you can see here, my system is connected to Azure Arc. Everything shows good here. So I'm going to log into the Azure portal, do my two-factor authentication, and then my account has been logged in. So I'm going to head straight to the Arc section of the Azure portal. I'm going to open Azure Arc and go look at the machines that I have here. Azure Arc resources, go to machines. Now server A has popped up over here, and then one thing that you need to consider is that you need to make sure this machine has those BIOS configurations enabled. Because I'm using a virtual environment, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my EXSI environment and have a look at my virtual machine. There is my VM server A. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to go to actions here and then go to edit settings. If this was a physical box, you go through the BIOS. So I'm going to go to VM options, and as you can see, we have some configuration here for a whole pile of things. What I'm interested in is VBS, virtualization-based security. You need to make sure this is enabled. After VBS have been enabled in the BIOS or through your VMware EXSI, if you're using EXSI, you need to also enable it in the operating system. So there are a couple of ways you can use PowerShell, or you can use group policy, but I'm going to use group policy. I'm going to go to the run prompt and open the local group policy editor by running gpedit.msc, and then under computer configuration, what we are looking for is administrative templates. Expand system and go to device guard, and then you need to make sure you've turned on virtualization based security here as well. So I'm going to go enable here, and then what we are looking for is we need to make sure we've enabled secure boot, and then we need to enable virtualization based protection of code with UEFI lock, and leave the rest at the default. I'm going to go apply here, go OK. And anytime you apply a group policy, you need to make sure you update it. So I'm going to go to command prompt by running cmd and say gp update /force to enforce the policy right away. Okay, that is done. Now to verify if this is running, I'm going to go back to the run prompt again by pressing window key R and put in msinfo32. Launch this msinfo32 and go check. It should show here that the virtualization-based security is running, but at the moment it's saying it's not running. It's enabled, but it's not running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just perform one more reboot on this server and then see what happens. So I'm going to go restart this server, go continue. Once I get in, I'm going to wait for the system to load. And let's go back to msinfo32 by running the run prompt again and then launching msinfo32 to double check. We need to make sure VBS is running, else the configuration is going to keep failing. As you can see, after one more restart, virtualization-based security is running here. Now, this should resolve the error that you normally see in the Azure portal when you try to enable hot patching. on a Windows Server 2025 box. All right, let's go back to the Azure portal. I'm going to launch my Edge browser. Once the Azure portal is loaded, I'm going to head straight to the Arc section. We need to make sure Azure Arc is showing here as connected in order for the portal to see the recent change that we've made on the server. So I'm going to give it a few minutes. As you can see, server A is connected to Azure Arc. So I'm going to click on server A here and then attempt my configuration again. I'm going to go to update and then I'm going to click on enroll now. Now, as you can see, it says here that VBS is enabled. So I'm going to check. I want to license Windows Server to receive monthly updates first and click confirm here. It's going to take a while. It can take up to 10 minutes for this to be enabled. So again, I'm going to pause the video, and once the enrollment is complete, I'm going to resume the video and I'm going to continue. As you can see, Hotpatch enrollment for server A was successful. I'm going to close this notification, refresh this section, and come to this section over here to change the Hotpatch configuration. I'm going to click this. It's already enabled. Just double checking. The next thing that you can do is that you can push this update manually by first of all running some assessments, or you can schedule updates. So go ahead and say check for update here and click on. So as you can see, it's performing an initial assessment to check which update is available for this server. This is also going to take a while, so I'm going to pause the video and allow it to complete. Once it's done, I'm going to resume and we're going to continue the demo. Now, the initial assessment has also been completed successfully. So I'm going to close this notification and go refresh the screen here. And it tells us that there are a bunch of updates over here. I'm going to go in here to my settings. Okay, as you can see, we have Windows Update here. So I'm going to go for Windows Update. And it's telling us over here that there are a whole bunch of updates. So I'm going to go ahead and click on install here to trigger the installation process. Now, after you perform the Hotpatch configuration, from the research that I've done, the initial install normally needs to be done. So very few first update that comes in needs to be installed before the Hotpatch can start coming in. Okay, so do not be surprised if you finish your Hotpatch configuration, you enable everything and you install your first update on your server and it tells you to reboot. I've seen this before, so when it happens to you, it's no problem. The subsequent updates that are going to come through are going to install without a reboot. So this marks the end of the video. If you want to configure Hotpatch for your Windows Server operating systems, you can follow the same procedure. Until I see you in the next video, stay safe, stay up to date.